Our mission is to empower people to help them make good financial decisions. It's our job, our mission is to go out, educate people so that they can make an informed financial decision and get to where they want to be financially.
MFP specializes in really understanding who you are. What is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish? And we believe that everybody should make informed financial decisions. So our skill set is understanding who you are at your core, walking you through multiple options of the different ways that can get you to where you need to be. And then together, we will build that plan together. It might be a retirement income plan. It might be a legacy plan. It might be sending all your kids to college. It just might be saving money on taxes. But whatever is most important to you, we will build a plan that reflects that.
One of the biggest motivators for us as a firm is we want our clients to get to where they want to be. It's not just from we want to sell you something, right? It's we want to be an important part of the path that got you where you wanted to be.
When we say empower people, I'm really meaning like most people in financial services to get talked at, not talked to. So they talk at them and say, hey, you should do this, you should do that, instead of saying, hey, what's important to you about X, whatever that X is, that X factor that's important to you, and understanding them through their lens, and then saying, okay, here's how we can build something that'll get you to what you said was important, and here are the action steps that you need to take, because sometimes all problems can't be solved with one action.
We are helping people make informed financial decisions because ultimately, everybody has different goals, everybody has different things they're working towards, and there's nothing worse than trying to make a decision and you don't know what to do, right? Like maybe you're reading something, you don't even know what it means, right? And so our job is to help you make those informed decisions so you can confidently get to where you want to be.
The vision for Mission Financial Planners is ultimately to develop a network of like-minded fiduciary professionals, one that we're able to take care of all of our clients' needs. And we start with financial planning, but it's going to grow. And what's really exciting is we don't know exactly how it's going to grow. It might be everything from one day we're bringing in a Mission Financial individual that is helping with your P&C insurance, that's helping you with your real estate, purchasing investment properties or selling and buying your forever home. Whatever it is, if it takes good advice, I would love for one day that we provide that, and it's with somebody within our network. People and businesses should work with Mission Financial Planners ultimately because of the skill sets that each of us bring. Myself through the process, Matt through his ideas, Jason through his deep understanding of advanced plannings and the tax laws. All those together get our clients to a place that sometimes transcends their initial goals and expectations.
MFP is a culture of learners. That's just the culture of our business, is get better so we can make our clients better.
And the reason people should choose Mission Financial Planners is because we're holistic. We look at the whole picture. We're not just a portfolio manager. We do look at the whole picture. And that's why people should choose us.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's Matt Donahue and Ken Hamilton again. We are here for part 4. We promised we'd get you done before the holiday season started, and we're doing it, in 2.5 days prior to the holiday season starting. So I guess it's really just 2 days at this point, but we're closed at noon on Wednesday. So for us, it's a little shorter. But if I don't say it tonight, I'll say it right up front. Have a great holiday season. If you're traveling, enjoy it. Right. I know, especially the holidays, it's tough to travel sometimes because it's just so busy, but just remember, you're going for the right reasons when you're traveling for the holidays. So have a great holiday season with your friends and your family. And, certainly we give all of you our best. tonight's workshop, estate planning, and this is actually a lot of fun to do in person with people, because usually what we have going on is a loop of music in the background. For those of you who don't know me or haven't been working with me, I'm a huge music guy. And so going around the screen here, what you'll see is we've got Aretha Franklin, we have Jimi Hendrix, we have Michael Jackson, we have Sonny Bono, we have Bob Marley, we have Kurt Cobain, we have Amy Winehouse. And I mean, they're all musicians, right? And they're all wildly successful musicians in their own right. But the thing that the three in the kind of the middle have in common, Amy Winehouse, Jimi Hendrix, and Kurt Cobain, they all died in their 20s, right? The others all lived longer lives. I mean, sadly for Bob Marley, he was in his early 40s when he got cancer and died, and Sonny Bono had that weird skiing accident or whatever it was where he died. Aretha Franklin lived to old age. Michael Jackson had his issues. But yeah, did they all die kind of young and unexpectedly? Sure, with exception of maybe Aretha Franklin. But the other thing they all have in common is they died with no estate plan of any kind. And that creates issues for people, right? And just a real basic one, and we'll talk about it later, is if you die without a will or a trust in place, the first thing that happens to your assets is they get frozen by a probate court, until an executor is approved by the court. And that can take time, right? That can take time. So these guys all died without an estate plan. Some of the litigation, if you really read into the way the families fought over some of this stuff, not Jimi Hendrix, excuse me, Bob Marley died 1981. The last lawsuit regarding his estate didn't get wrapped up until 2019. They were fighting over his estate, the right to use his name, the right to use his music, his image, right? All that stuff for 38 years after he died. Now, granted, none of us, I think, are going to have, estates that are worth 400, 500, $1 billion like some of these people did, but we can create the same angst and problems for our families. Speaking of dying without an estate plan, Prince, and I'm a native of Minnesota, so Prince was a big deal in Minnesota. When he died, he had no estate plan. He had no children. He was not married. And he had something like 30 cousins came forward and all said, oh, I'm the guy, right? I should get a bunch of this. Well, the problem was nothing could happen because none of his cousins had enough money to cover the costs at probate of getting an executor appointed and approved by the court. The comedian George Lopez had to give $20,000 to Prince's family so they could get through that initial logjam of getting that executor approved by a probate court. And then things could start to move, right? So this is a mess, right? This is a mess. It's not just a mess for famous people either, though. It can be a mess for family. And this is my godfather. This is my Uncle Ken. He died 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago this fall in a motorcycle accident. And fortunately for him and his family, his injuries he sustained, I mean, this sounds weird saying it, right? But the injuries sustained were something where he died relatively quickly after sustaining them. It wasn't like he lingered for a year or two or three and then passed away, right? It was relatively quick. But he had no plan. And my cousin Tim and my cousin Mike, who, my cousin Tim's a year older than me. My cousin Mike is like 3 months younger than me. Out of the 16 cousins I had on that side of the family growing up, the three of us were always getting into trouble together, right? I mean, because three guys all basically the same age, right in the middle of the pack too. So nobody was really paying attention other than our parents to what we were doing. But I'll never forget, fall of 13, I'm getting ready to go on stage to do one of my Social Security talks in Spokane, Washington. And I get a text from my cousin Mike saying, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk? He never texted me like that, right? And never, right? So I call, he's like, yeah, Dad's been in a bad accident. We don't think he's going to make it. Do you think he can come to northern Minnesota to be here to at least say goodbye while he's still alive? And folks, I was 5 minutes from going on stage, right? I was supporting an advisor. I have to admit, I still went on stage. I gave the presentation. I talked with all the people in the room afterwards and all that. Got back to my hotel, called my wife because I had a 6-month-old baby at home at the time, and my wife's expecting me home. And I'm like, this just happened. What do you want me to do? She says, change your flight, go to Fargo, North Dakota, which is where the hospital was he was at. do what you got to do and then come home. So I did. Long story short, though, I go to the hospital. Tim and Mike are there, and Mike's very religious. Tim is not religious at all, and so they have very different ideas about what end of life should mean for someone, and they're arguing about it. Why are they arguing? Because Ken didn't leave a plan. He didn't have legal documentation saying this is what's supposed to happen when I'm incapacitated, or if I become incapacitated and can't make my own decisions. There was nothing, right? And I'll never forget, Tim and Mike are arguing, and Tim, who was maybe a little more like Uncle Ken, finally looked at Mike and said, if Dad suddenly woke up and walked in the room right now, he would take a swing at me, cousin Tim, for letting it even go this far. And we've all been there where you've had these really huge like life moments, right? Where two people are arguing about something that really does matter. And Mike just kind of deflated. He's like, yeah, you're right. Let's do what Dad would have wanted to do. Why would you put Mike in that scenario? Why would you put Tim in that scenario? Why is your godson in the room? Right? I mean, I don't have any rights there. I don't have any say in what's going on, right? So we're going to talk about some of these things tonight, and it's just, when people die, especially when they die unexpectedly, and folks, you've heard me talk about longevity. You've heard me talk about, the men in my family live and work a long time and things like that. And so that's what I think. But, right now in my own family, my 54-year-old brother-in-law found out 2 weeks ago that he's got stage 4 lung cancer, and he never smoked a day in his life, right? So, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. And that's why we do the planning. That's why we talk so much about financial planning, income planning, having a good healthcare plan in place, having a good tax plan in place. Tonight, we're going to talk about having a good estate plan in place. A couple disclaimers, just like last week with taxes. Last week with taxes, we had to say we're not CPAs. Well, we are not attorneys. We do not provide legal advice. We do not provide tax advice. We do not practice law. So for any attorneys in the room, we are not at all trying to do what you do. What we are trying to do is inform you so that you can make good decisions. It really comes down to that kind of fine line of, hey, we can help you with legal planning. We can't give you legal advice. We can't actually do we can't do a will or a trust for you. That's why we partner with a great company, a great law firm that can do it for you. And again, our mission, we want to help you make good decisions. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, so this is me again, but you've seen a lot of me over the last month. But what we're going to talk about a little bit here is integrated trust systems. That's the firm we partner with for estate planning to service our clients. So the legal team is headed up by Jennifer Cermak. She is based out of Oklahoma. She does estate planning and probate. You can see the rest of the attorneys here. We have Ed Kaiser. We also have Sierra Lister. We have Chelsea Keller. And then on top of that, we have Nathaniel Landman, who's based in Missouri and is a tax attorney. And we work very closely with Nathaniel on a lot of different issues with clients. So if you do have a significant tax issue you're dealing with now, let us know. We can do a warm introduction to Nathaniel, make sure you're going to get service. He's 30 plus years of experience, totally knows what he's doing. He handled my 2021 audit for me, by the way, and did a great job. So, my personal experience with Nathaniel was very positive. So the way we're different from other teams, well, you've got the legal advice, right, that you will get from an attorney. You've got the tax advice, which you can get it from a tax attorney if you need to. Don't forget, we also work with the Malloy Management Group. So if you're just really looking for someone to file your taxes, help you with some deduction planning and things like that, Patrice Malloy at her team, and her team are a great resource. But then from a financial planning standpoint, you've got us at Mission Financial Planners. And don't forget, we also can do the insurance planning and the income planning and all those things as well. This is what differentiates us, though, is that we've got these services that you can take advantage of by working with us. We also work with trust companies. One of the trust companies we work with is domiciled in Nevada. You'll find out why a little bit later. That is the Crawford Trust Company. Another trust company we work with is Arden Trust Company. They're domiciled out of Delaware. I'll hit this point a lot tonight, but the reason you want to work with a trust company when you have a trust in place is the trust companies know how to wrap up a trust. They know how to take care of those things. They know what they've got to do, and they take that burden of getting that done off the shoulders of your friend or your family member that you named to be the successor trustee to your trust. In fact, you can Google this, right? Is it a good idea to name a friend or a family member as a successor trustee? I have not seen any articles from anywhere that says it's a good idea to name a friend or a family member. You're much better off naming a trust company or a bank or somebody like that. But we do work with them quite closely, and have had a lot of great experience with them. Okay, concept I want to touch on before we get into some of the estate planning actual nuts and bolts is a concept called jurisdictional shopping. Jurisdictional shopping basically says, look, you live in the United States of America. There's 50 states, there's the District of Columbia, there's Puerto Rico, but you live in the United States, right? If you buy a car in Louisiana and drive it home to Houston, you own that car, right? Texas doesn't say, oh, no, you don't own that car anymore because you drove it across the border, right? It's no, you own that car. Now, you may, and I don't even know if Louisiana has a sales tax, but you may have paid a sales tax on that car in Louisiana. You may have to pay it again when you get it titled in Texas, right? I mean, you may have to do that. But contractually, legally, it's your car, right? It's your car. It doesn't matter that you bought it in Louisiana and you're a Texas citizen, Texas resident, right? That same concept applies to businesses. And if you look on the S&P 5 or Fortune 500, 64% of the Fortune 500 firms in the US are domiciled in Delaware. Why is that? Because Delaware has the best corporate legal structure to protect a corporation of any state in the country. And that's why so many companies get domiciled in Delaware. Big examples right here in Texas, Dell Computer, domiciled in Delaware. Going with the computer industry for a moment, that little company up in Seattle called Microsoft, right? Domiciled in Delaware. Coca-Cola over in Georgia, right? Domiciled in Delaware. And I could go on and on and on. It's for the exact same reason. It's this concept called jurisdictional shopping. It doesn't matter that their headquarters are outside of Austin or Seattle or Atlanta, depending on the company you're talking about. What matters is their corporations in the United States. They can choose any state to incorporate through that they want. You can do the same thing for estate planning. A lot of people don't know that. And one of the reasons we like ITS so much is they took us through a lot of training. And one of the things that they did point out is, from a probate standpoint, from an estate law standpoint, Nevada has the best asset protection laws and some of the best just estate protection systems of any state in the union. Just as a quick example for you, when you go through probate, your probate assets need to get published. The reason they need to get published, and a lot of people don't like that, right? Because it's like, here's all your stuff and now it's out in a public format. But the reason they do that is because there might be legitimate creditors out there who are like, wait a second, hey, Matt owed me whatever he owed me on his house. I didn't know he died. I need to collect, what he owes me on the house out of his estate, right? Those kind of things. That's why they publish it. The problem with that, of course, is can it attract predators? It can, right? Well, in Nevada, if someone's coming after your estate, legitimate creditor or not, they have to go through a two-step process. Step one is they have to go to the probate court and say, you know what, Matt Donahue died. I'm a legitimate creditor to his estate. Here's my documentation to prove it. Guess what the predator has to do? The exact same thing. Oh, I'm a creditor of Matt Donahue's estate. They'll say, okay, prove it. I can't. Okay, then you can't proceed. See, the difference there, folks, is they got to prove it to the court first. You don't have to defend it, right? And that's just one example of some of the things Nevada does that other states don't do, right? They also have a lot of other trusts that you can set up. So if we're talking mostly things like living trusts, testamentary trusts, things like that a lot of people will set up, revocable trusts, then yeah, I mean, Nevada will do those and they'll do them well. But sometimes you're specifically looking for asset protection. You're looking for a special needs trust. You're looking for an irrevocable life insurance trust. And for those other types of trusts are terrific, or done really well in Nevada. Okay, why we're here and how we're able to help. Okay, from an estate planning standpoint, there's 90 million people who who are going to go through probate in the next 20 years. $2 billion gets spent on probate fees. And guys, when you think about probate fees, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's whatever I got to pay the court. It isn't. Let's say you have a house. How are you going to sell the house? You're gonna sell it direct as the owner. You're going to get a realtor to do it for you. You're going to get a realtor. Okay, so there's fees there. Let's say you have a unique collection of some kind, whatever that might be. Do you just want them to sell it, or do they need to bring in an appraiser who can say, here's how much it's worth, bring in a broker who can actually find buyers for the unique collection? Those people don't work for free, right? Let's say you have a huge investment portfolio that's managed by us here at Mission Financial Planners. Do we suddenly stop charging fees on the portfolio? No, right? So a lot of people say, oh, well, probate fees, whatever, it's really not going to be that much, but all those expenses are still there, right? They're still going to happen. Now, 360 families a day throughout the US are going through this every year. The problem is only 40% of Americans have a will, and less than 20% of Americans actually have a trust. Now, here's what I think is kind of fascinating about this, because I'm always interested in the behavioral side of things, like why do people do what they do? Half of the people said that their assets aren't worth enough to consider an estate plan. Folks, let me tell you something. In Texas, if your total estate is $75,000 or more, you're going through probate. That's the way the state is set up. Okay, so some of y'all bought trucks that are worth more than $75,000, right? So 49%, right? My assets aren't worth enough to consider an estate plan. Think again. Okay, 35% of people though know someone who's gone through something like what I did with Tim and Mike when a family member had an issue, right? So 1 out of 3 people know someone who's gone through the issues that not having an estate plan has caused, right? 25% don't even want to talk about it because, to be totally candid, death scares us all, right? And they don't even want to think about, oh my God, when I die, it's over, right? They don't. Unfortunately, almost 60% of people think a will is going to be enough, and it just isn't. You'll see why as we go through it. But the good news here on all this is about half of people say, you know what, I do want to learn more. I do want to learn more. So that's, to me, is always encouraging. It's always encouraging. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 main things. Before we do, I know we have Ken in the background tonight. And what we'll do is Ken will pop in and out a couple times. We're not going to do the formal breakout sessions like we did last time. So I was just checking to see if he's going to pop in right now, but he isn't. So we're going to go, oh, there he is. Ken, anything you want to add before we get into the 4 main topics of tonight?
The thing I want to leave y'all with is really just, some of you probably have done a fair amount of this work. And maybe it covers 70, maybe it covers 90, maybe even 95% of some of the risks that we'll be talking about. But as we believe in being empowered and informed, just a little bit of energy to get rid of 5% off the risks that maybe you haven't covered, is it worth it? And why hasn't this been brought to your attention? And that's why we're here, is to make sure you're as informed as possible. But yeah, Matt, go ahead, bud.
All right, thank you. Okay. First of all, what happens when there's no plan? Okay, here's an example. We've got Jed and Emma, and Emma's his daughter. Now, Jed's old school, right? Jed is he's a successful farmer. And by the way, this is a story that was told to me by a friend of mine. Successful farmer. His wife has passed on. They had 1 daughter, and he's a little old-fashioned. He kind of feels like he needs to kind of like be the bachelor host for his daughter. Right. But she's going to inherit everything when he's gone. So he's like, it's a lot to manage with one person. I hope you're married. He's trying to help her settle down. So what does Jed do? Jed, he goes and invites all the eligible bachelors in the area and says, hey, come on over to the house. I got something I want to take you through. So he brings them over to the house. He wines them. He dines them. He takes them out in the backyard. They're having their barbecue and doing all this stuff. He's got the giant, pool in the back and all that stuff. And he says, okay, guys, here's the deal. I want to introduce you to my daughter, Emma, but I want to make sure that I'm introducing the right guy to her. Now, whether Emma's going to like this guy or not, who cares, right? Jed's not thinking about that, obviously. But, okay, so here's the deal. The first guy who can swim across this pool is going to have a choice. He can either get $1 million from me, he can get 1,000 acres of land from me, or he'll get the warm introduction to Emma from me. whatever he wants. And no sooner does he say the warm introduction, he doesn't even finish the sentence, there's a splash. And by the time he finishes the sentence, a young man pops up on the other side of the pool. Now the problem with that is it's like Olympic sized pool, right? Like he made it through in like 4 seconds, like faster than Michael Phelps, right? Well, why'd he go so fast? Well, in that pool, there's sharks, there's alligators, there's sea snakes, there's anything in the water that could kill you, right? And he zoomed right across that pool. Well, Jed goes over to him, and this young man's soaking wet, and Jed goes over to him and says, "Wow, that was like, I'm amazed. I mean, do you want the $1 million?" And the young man's like, "No." And he's like, "Do you want the 1,000 acres?" "No." "Do you want the introduction to Emma?" "No way, I don't want that." And Jed's like, "Wait, well, what do you want?" And he says, "I want to know who pushed me in the pool." So that's the thing, folks. When we don't do the planning, it's like you're getting pushed in the pool. And I hate to say this about my own family, but my godfather Ken, that's exactly what he did to Tim and Mike, right? He pushed them in the pool. So common questions: what's better than a will, or what's better, a will or a trust? How does probate work? Can you avoid probate? So those are some of the things we'll talk about. So first of all, what is probate? It's the process of administering a deceased person's estate, like it says on the slide. Very simple. It resolves claims, basically. It comes from a Latin term that essentially says take an inventory and then apply the inventory to the people that it belongs to. It's pretty straightforward. So the reason it exists, though, is because it's designed to help your estate transfer on to the people it's supposed to transfer to. Probate is there to help. Okay. Is it a process? Can it be burdensome? Can it be expensive? It can. It can. Some of the issues with probate. Okay. Number one is fees. So when you're looking at probate, attorney fees, if you hire an attorney to represent you, will be able to charge 5% of your gross estate. So folks, if your gross estate is worth $1 million, they could charge $50,000, but they can also ask for additional fees as long as those fees are reasonable and necessary. The cost will also vary depending on the attorney and the firm, and they may also add in additional hourly fees depending on the value and complexity. Now, remember what I said earlier, right? If your estate's pretty straightforward, you might not really be that worried about the fees adding up. But if you have any of those other issues I mentioned, right? Maybe there's a collection of some kind that's going to need to be disposed of. How does that happen? You hire an appraiser. Appraiser doesn't work for free, right? You might have to hire a broker or an auctioneer to sell it. They don't work for free. Selling your house, your primary residence, right? Your whoever is wrapping up your estate's probably going to hire a realtor. What do they have to do to get the house sellable, especially in today's market where people are being asked to pay 7-8% on 30-year mortgages, right? Kind of like it used to be back in the day, right? Like we all lived with, 20, 30 years ago. So these are questions that you need to ask yourself, because people say probate fees, 5%. Oh, well, that, whatever, that's not that expensive. But then you start adding all these other costs up, and guess what? It gets expensive in a hurry. If you don't have a plan in place as well, Texas has a set of rules that you do have to follow. So, the question you need to ask yourself is, if you haven't done any of this planning, like most people haven't, but if you haven't done any of this planning, where do you want your dollars to go? Do you want them to go to where Texas says they're supposed to go? Or do you want them to go to your family, your loved ones, your friends, the people that you care about? I'm blasting through Nevada and California. We don't have anyone from Nevada and California on tonight's call, so there's no point in going through that. Now, in Texas, what happens? Remember before what I said about George Lopez with Prince, right? His estate got frozen until the executor was approved by or appointed and provides proof of death. Well, okay, your assets are frozen until the executor gets appointed and provides the proof of death. So if you don't have an executor, you didn't do any planning, right? Okay, someone has to come forward to the court with the death certificate. It's probably gonna be your kids, right? Or one of your kids. They're gonna come forward. They're gonna say, okay, mom died, dad predeceased her years ago. Here's the deal. And the court's gonna be like, okay, great. Here's what you need to do to get appointed as executor. What do you mean? Nothing can happen until you're actually legally appointed as the executor. Mom's got bills to pay. We understand that, sir, ma'am, but You can't touch your mom's assets for any of that until you're appointed and provide proof of death. How long could that take? Week, 2 weeks, month, however long it takes. Public record. Remember what I said before. When you die, your probate assets, your probate estate gets published. They're not doing it maliciously. They're doing it because legitimate creditors need to know that you've passed away so they can, get what they are owed out of your estate. Remember what I said, the issue that creates though is that there's predators out there who are going to try to get money out of the estate as well, or may try to get money out of the estate. Okay. And that's that contestability you can see at the bottom of the slide there. Go past Nevada and California. All right. So here's how the process works. If you have a will, you're going to go through probate. What happens? Your property, whether it's real property, like you can see on the left side of the screen there, your house, your car, your toys, that kind of stuff, goes in the probate box. So does your cash, so do your investment accounts, so do your stock. Now, I'll say a couple things about investment accounts. If you have named a beneficiary to the investment account, it won't go through probate because it'll function as a process of law. So for example, maybe you have an IRA and you named your children as the beneficiaries to the IRA. The money's going to go right to the kids. It'll bypass probate. Maybe you die with a life insurance policy. The money from the policy will go to the named beneficiary. It'll bypass probate. Okay. We're going to talk about some reasons why you still maybe don't want to name the kids as the beneficiaries directly, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. Liquidation costs. Hey, the attorney can charge 5%. If there's a professional executor, maybe you are working with a trust company, they do have fees as well. There's accounting fees, there's realtor fees, there's all these other fees. But let's say you budget for a total of a 10% liquidation cost. So 10% of the estate's gone. If you're at a higher level estate, you could also lose a significant amount to federal estate taxes as well. But don't forget, you've still got to pay income taxes for the year that you passed away. Right? There's still taxes that, believe it or not, there's something called income in respect of a decedent, IRD, which, is money coming from like an annuity that is paying an income stream to you, things like that. That creates tax issues in and of itself, right? So you've got federal estate taxes, some of the state taxes, selling off some of the stuff, buying the things you need to buy to make sure the place is ready to go. You're still gonna have to pay all those taxes. Those, if you have to redo the kitchen to make the house sellable, the money you spent on the kitchen, guess what? You're going to pay sales tax on that, right? On the stuff you have to buy. So add it all up, as much of 40% of the value of your estate could go out the window. Okay, as much as. So if you set up a revocable trust, and you heard me use the term testamentary trust, earlier, it's the same thing or very similar. What happens is you eliminate a lot of the transaction costs. You also eliminate a lot of the attorney fees. You actually generate a significant savings. Now, I don't personally believe it would ever mean always 100% is going to go to the family. Because remember, you're still going to pay a realtor to sell the house. You're still going to pay taxes and things like that, right? The trustee, it doesn't work for free, right? But you're much more likely to be closer to 100% with a trust than you are with a will. So probate's not the problem, right? Probate does serve an important purpose. It makes sure people know who need to know that you passed away and that people can do it. But it's a choice, right? It's a choice. So the question you want to ask yourself is, am I setting everything up for probate because I choose to, or I'm not just interested? I'm just not, I'll do it next year, right? Or I'm just not sure what to do, right? And so the question comes down, do you want to avoid probate as well as possible? If you go down the trust road, which I can't professionally recommend because everybody's situation is different, but if you go down the trust road, here's how it works. You and your spouse are the grantor/settler of the trust. So you're the party who puts the stuff in the trust. So let's say you set up a trust and you own your own home. You're going to retitle your home into the name of the trust, right? You as the grantor and settler, though, on a revocable trust, testamentary trust, right? You as that person, you still own the house. You still have control of the house. It's just titled in your trust name. And you're the only person, the named parties to the trust, you're the only people who have control over the trust. So you're not giving up control of anything. You do that with your cars. You do that with your bank accounts. You do that with your brokerage accounts, right? All that stuff gets put in that trust bundle that you can see in the middle of the screen, okay? You die, your spouse takes over, your spouse dies, now the trust kicks in, and the executor or the trustee at that point is whoever the successor trustee was. And remember earlier I said you probably don't want to name a family member or a friend as the trustee, successor trustee. And the reason why is, I'll just give you an example from my personal life. My parents still live in Minnesota. They live in a small town about 3 hours away from Minneapolis. I live in San Antonio, Texas. My wife works full time. I work at Mission Financial Planners as one of the managing members, one of the owners. We also own our own insurance agency, Valero Insurance Agency. So I have two businesses, two precocious kids who are in tons of after-school activities. My wife works as well. Now mom and dad are gone. Well, Matt's in financial services. He's a CFP. He knows all this stuff. We're going to name Matt as the successor trustee. I live 1,000 miles away. I have two full-time jobs. I have a family. I'm not doing it. I can't. I mean, that is like adding a full-time job. The other thing that you're doing is when you set up someone to be the successor trustee, an individual, they're held to a fiduciary standard, which means no matter how tempted they are to do whatever, they have to act in the trust's best interest. And if they breach that fiduciary standard and someone takes them to court, they can be held personally liable for it. So you really want to think carefully if you're going to name a successor trustee as a person, as opposed to a bank, a trust company, an organization like that. Okay, if you already have a trust, congratulations, great job. Couple questions you want to ask yourself. Number one, is the trust properly and fully funded? Most trusts are not. And what the funding means is essentially you're retitling the assets into the name of the trust. That's what gets them in the trust. So you set up the trust, now the assets have to be moved into the trust, right? The house has to be moved into the trust, okay? Is your healthcare power of attorney HIPAA compliant? And can your power of attorney, whomever that might be, access your medical records? Are they available online somewhere? Does the medical power of attorney give them access to it? Do they know how to access it? Does your current trust have an IRA beneficiary trust? Remember I said earlier, IRAs, you can name a beneficiary and it'll pass as a function of law. Well, guess what? You'll bypass probate, but you may not want to have the money go directly to your kids, for example. You may want to have it go to a trust for a couple different reasons. Are you sure who the successor executors, are you sure of who those people are? The more important thing, folks, is have you asked them and told them that you're expecting them to do that after you pass away? Think about the long-term care conversation we had a few weeks ago. This is the same conversation, only it's about what happens after you're gone, right? Do they know you're expecting them to do this? Got to have the conversation. Do you have a pour-over will? So one of the things, wills can get stale, right? Doesn't mean they're not valid, but it's just, you probably want to get your will updated like every 5 years because you're going to buy and sell stuff, right? If your will doesn't reflect, some of the stuff that's in there, that's that can be okay. But if you have a pour-over will, what it's basically saying is, look, anything that's not named in the will needs to go into the trust upon my death and gets distributed per the terms of the trust. Does it bypass probate? No. But will it get distributed per the terms of the trust? Yes. Right? So it would still go through probate, but you're good to go. What's changed? Question number 6. Just go down the list, guys. Who got divorced? Who got married? Who had a baby? Who got disabled? Who inherited some money? Who bought something? Whose career took off and now they bought a giant home somewhere, right? Or whatever, right? What's changed? Because things are always changing. And then finally, do people know what you want done when you're incapacitated, or do they have to be like Tim and Mike and argue about it in a conference room in a hospital in Fargo, North Dakota? Okay. So those are all questions you want to ask yourself. Let's talk about some situations that can lead to some of these unfortunate results. Okay, so let's say you both pass away suddenly, right? You're in a car accident and neither one of you walks away. Maybe even just one of you, it's just you. You're single. Like my Uncle Ken was divorced, right? So you're single. You've had this bad accident. Adult children come to the hospital. That's Tim and Mike. But the hospital can only tell them so much. The hospital, and we give this talk in hospitals to hospital staff quite a bit, hospitals have to do what they have to do. And if there's no direction, no directive on place, regardless of what you want that directive to be, they're not going to do what you say, right? They're not going to do what you say. So they can't get information. They can't say, look, here's what mom and dad would want done. Is that a concern? Parents passing away. Okay. We expect parents to pass away before the children do, right? We expect that, but we also know that's not what always happens. What if a child passes away before you and they're married with 2 kids? Do you necessarily want your share going to their spouse? Or do you want it held in some way for the benefit of your grandchildren? What do you want to have happen? Is that a concern? Joint tenancy. All right. People like to use joint tenancy as a solution for this. So a couple scenarios for you. One is maybe you're putting a child on the house and the bank account. So things that can happen. What if the child's going through a divorce? That no good son-in-law or daughter-in-law, because it's not your kid's fault, right? It's that no good son-in-law or daughter-in-law, right? But what if they're going through a divorce? And what if that person has a great attorney? And that attorney says, that joint ownership on mom and dad's house, we should go after that. What if one of your kids is involved in a lawsuit and a creditor goes after your house from a joint tenancy standpoint? Or bad stuff happened. Child ends up going through bankruptcy. You're exposed, right? So in any one of these 3 scenarios, right, you're exposed. Is joint tenancy the solution? Might or may not be. You have a large IRA, big retirement account, okay? You pass away. That money, like I said before, your child's going to get a lump sum. And there's loads of data out there that backs this statement up that I'm about to make. And number one is most people will spend the IRA that they inherit within a year, which means they're going to pay the absolute most in taxes that they can. And number 2 is of those people who actually do that, it's like 80% of people spend the IRA in the first year. Okay. Of that 80%, another third, so a third of the people who spend it all in a year are actually in a worse position financially at the end of that 12 months than they were before they inherited it. It's what happens, right? So couple ideas, right? What if your child's going through a lawsuit or a bankruptcy and they inherit that money? Now that money's exposed. Number 2, what if they're married and now there's a divorce, right? Could a divorce attorney try to force a split there? They could, right? Are these concerns? That's where an IRA beneficiary trust can be a great resource. It can be a great tool for you, okay? So what they do essentially is they manage the distribution once you're gone, and it helps protect the value you're leaving your kids from lawsuits and from things like divorce, right? From bankruptcies, all that stuff, because there's only so much income coming in. Conservatorship. Okay, so conservatorships get a really bad rap, especially in the celebrity world. We've all heard of Britney Spears. Most of you probably heard of Michael Oher and the conservatorship issues that they had there, right? So, conservatorships, do they have issues? Yes, but when you're older and you're trying to make sure that you get the care you deserve, folks, you don't just need to have a long-term care plan in place. You have to make sure that your assets are protected as well. Because, and I saw this in my own family, right? My mother's grandmother, who had done very well for herself, moved out to California to live close to one of her daughters and son-in-law. And my mom and dad went out to visit, and sure enough, grandma's in a 6x6 concrete box, basically in a below average, elderly person's facility. And what happened? Her daughter basically was like, that's my money, that's not mom's money, and I'm taking it now because I'm the one who's responsible for mom's care, and mom's going into what I can afford to put her into. Not saying your kids will do that to you, folks. I'm just saying I've seen it happen. Put a conservatorship in place, right? Protect yourself. Just protect yourself. Then the last thing, or one of the last things, if your spouse ends up incapacitated and they have an IRA, and the IRA is your biggest asset, okay, and you need that money to help pay medical bills and stuff like that, can you access it? You can't. It doesn't make any sense, right? You could have been married 45 years and they've got $2 million in their IRA and now they're laying in a hospital bed and you need to get $100,000 to pay medical bills or other bills, whatever it might be, and you can't access it because IRA stands for individual retirement account. They are the only person who can control it, they or their power of attorney, right? So again, is that a concern? Probably should be. And the last one, and as a parent, this one just scares me to death. What happens if one of your children becomes incapacitated? You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and I have a 7 and a 10-year-old, but one of the things we're going to do for both as they get ready to go to college is we're going to put into place a basic estate plan to include the medical directive or medical power of attorneys, all that stuff, to make sure that if something does happen, and God forbid something happens, but that me or my wife could go in and help make a decision. Now they get married, right? Okay, great. That needs to change. It needs to become their spouse, right? But in the short term, right? You know, hopefully short term, hopefully they don't take forever to start their own families. But in the short term, you know, you got to make sure something like that's in place for your younger adult children. Christmas is coming up, folks. It's a good time to do it. It's a good time to do it. Okay, proper estate planning can help you with all 7 of those scenarios. Ken, before I jump into some tax-free income ideas, anything you want to add on those 7 scenarios I just took everyone through?
I think probably the biggest one is, and I guess this might address it, is a lot of my accounts, they have beneficiaries. They're going to avoid probate. Is that good enough to be addressing it? And Matt was talking about it. Well, yes, you have, by having the beneficiaries attached to it, it avoids probate. It's going to go to your loved one. So yes, it's going to eliminate some of those fees and expenses. But the reality is that life doesn't happen cleanly. We just talked through all those different scenarios that can be exposed. And with just a little bit of energy and effort and knowledge, we can eliminate those risks, those possibilities, and how you envision your hard work, your assets, how they will live on and impact your family. You can have control over that with just, again, that knowledge, that energy, and some good planning overall. Matt?
All right. Thank you, Ken. All right, we're in the home stretch here. Tax-free income, and why do we want to have tax-free income? Well, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. One is, do you currently have a qualified retirement account? Do you have an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, or a 457? Right. Number 2, do you have an advisor? And number 3 is, what is your advisor's plan to divorce the IRS? We talked about this a lot last week with tax planning, and we're talking one-on-one on this, but these are some of the questions. When you look at after-tax distributions, we saw this slide last week, right? If we have an estate plan in place that is also managing taxes while you're alive, we can get that tax rate as low as possible and try to drive down the tax bill, which doesn't just mean more income for you while you're alive. It also means you can pass more on in a tax efficient manner to your loved ones once you've passed away. Now, dividends and distributions, a lot of people think, hey, well, yeah, I'm going to buy the dividend paying stocks, the Royals, whatever that expression is. But here's the thing. If you take money out of an IRA, you're taxed dollar for dollar on it, whether it's a dividend, whether it's a stock, or capital gain, doesn't matter. When you sell and the money comes out of the IRA, you are taxed at income tax rates, right? Even your brokerage account, if you just have a brokerage account, you think, yeah, well, I'm going to get dividends and interest just distributed to me. Well, dividends are taxed at income, and capital gains, assuming they're long-term capital gains, and assuming your household income's under about $400,000, those will get taxed at 15 to 18%, right? And there's like a 2-part tax bill in there. But the point is this: you're still paying taxes, right? If it's coming out of those qualified accounts, taxable. If you're non-qualified accounts, you're still going to pay taxes on it, right? So where most people get blown up by the IRS is when they get in their 70s. It's not in your 60s. It's not right away when you retire. It's in your 70s. So if you think all the way back to the Social Security workshop we did, one of the breakouts that Ken led was how the bigger Social Security check for one couple cut their tax bill in half every year. The other thing I'll challenge you on is in your 60s, one of the reasons you may want to wait on things like taking Social Security or delaying taking pensions as long as possible is because that required minimum distribution in your 70s forces you to take money out of your IRA. If you fail to do it, they charge you a 30% excise tax on top of the taxes you're supposed to pay anyways, and it just turns into a mess. If you don't need the money, if you don't want to take the money out of the IRA, you still have to do it, right? And it just crushes your taxes as you get older. And as you saw last week, it changes how your Social Security gets taxed. It changes what you're paying for your Medicare, right? So it's all these ripples start hitting you. Well, again, from an estate planning standpoint, if we have a mind on maximizing the after-tax value of the estate, one of the things we need to look at is, are we moving that money out of those IRAs into tax-friendly locations? Okay, so can you reduce taxes in retirement? You can if you have that strategy in place. Can you protect your assets? Absolutely you can. And folks, that can be done through some simple estate planning, right? Some of the things you've seen tonight. The question I would ask you, or no, not would, the question I'm going to ask you is, why doesn't your advisor talk to you about these things? We hear all the time from people, oh, well, I haven't asked them. Folks, that's not your job. That's not your job at all. Your job is to be the client. You're paying for advice. You are paying fees to people every year. And if all you're getting is asset management, you're not getting, hey, you know what? I'm not an attorney, but let me give you some legal planning ideas that you should talk about with your attorney, right? Or better yet, here's an attorney that I know that you can work with. Let's set up a meeting with all three of us. Same thing from a tax standpoint. Folks, that fee you're paying for asset management is not worth it, because that should be covering all these other things as well. And for most people, I've been doing this for a long time. I know for most people, it doesn't. Okay, so we talked about retirement income over the last 4 weeks, right? What I want to leave you with is the idea of something called the ultimate love note. Okay. Part of writing this ultimate love note is not just to say whether you do it with a video or you do it with a handwritten or you type something up and sign it. It's not to just say, oh, make sure people know you love them and stuff like that, which is important, right? It's important. But it's also, if you set up a good tax efficient retirement plan, you're maximizing your legacy. Because a good tax efficient retirement plan means that you get to be there. You get to do the things that you want to do. You get to be as involved as you can be, right? As much as your children want you involved, right? You have the option to do it. When those unexpected things happen, like we went through with those 7 reasons you might want to consider getting an estate plan set up, when those things happen, you've got ideas already. You've got trusted people you can talk to about, hey, what should I do? That is where the rubber hits the road with the idea of things like an ultimate love note. It's not just the letter. It's what did we do to make sure that we are leaving the best overall legacy possible. A couple last ideas. If you're looking for ideas on this, and I know it's a little morbid, but it's terrific. It's amazing. Randy Pausch was a computer science professor who died in the mid-2000s from pancreatic cancer. And you can see he was diagnosed at 45, he died at 47. But if you read his stuff, one of the things that Professor Pausch talked about was, yeah, I'm not happy that I'm going to be dead before 50, right? Because he knew, right? He said, but what I am happy about is that I've got time to do and say some of the things I have to do and say. Think about that perspective for a second. How many of us have something we'd love to say to someone, but we've just never done it, right? How many of us want to make sure that, someone actually hears, hey, you know what, I'm proud of you and I always have been, right? That's what he was thankful for. He was in his 40s and he's diagnosed with a terminal illness. And here the guy is saying, I'm thankful because it gives me a chance to say goodbye, right? Versus dying in an accident or living 25 years, never having these conversations. And then in my 70s, I suddenly pass away or I get ill and I can't say it anymore. Right. And so the quote I'll leave you with right in the middle, and you can see his writing and all that there, but the quote I'll leave you with right in the middle, be prepared. Luck really, truly, and I believe this in completely, luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. What's the preparation? You've seen it with us, right? You've seen it with us. Financial planning, tax planning, healthcare planning, legal planning, right? When you're talking one-on-one with us, our asset management is world class, right? But we view the asset management as just a part of this much bigger plan. And folks, that's why you want to work with us. If you want to go down this estate planning road, you need to meet with, your advisor, because we pre-screen people before they can even work with the ITS attorneys. It's part of our arrangement with them. But essentially, we'll take you through the process to get everything teed up so that the attorney then can finalize everything. All right. So Ken, I think you're going to take people through a couple ideas in terms of what's available. I don't want to overstep myself there,
Sure.
but I'll leave you with this before I turn it over to Ken for the last part here so he can wrap up. Fund your trust. Whether you do it with us through ITS, whether you do it with somebody else, fund your trust. Don't be like most people and get the trust in place, and then you don't do the legwork and move your cars into the trust, the house into the trust, your accounts into the trust. Fund the trust, because if you don't do that, you just wasted money on the trust. It's not going to be able to do what you need it to do. So make sure you fund that trust. All right, Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. So, we've already gotten this question in the chat, and we get this pretty much every single time we have this conversation is, so I've done the work. I have my 50-pound 3-inch binder, and I carry it with me all the time. Do I really have to go through this process all again? Because it took us months to get this in place last time. And the answer is, yeah, you do. Now, the good news is that through the platform that ITS has, through the, at least again, if you choose to go through ITS, is that it is a very quick, seamless process overall, but it will take care of all of those updates. The other feature that this platform has is that it allows unlimited changes to your estate plan for forever. The only maintenance cost is $95 on an annual basis. Now, think about the last time you needed to make a change to your will or trust. How long did it take to get that appointment scheduled with that attorney? How long did it take to get that revised draft and to get it formally documented? And then let's also think, how much did it cost you? How much did it cost to get put in place every single change that had to be there? Now, everybody's plan is different. Everybody's needs are different. But let me go ahead and share my screen. There it is. So this platform is rather robust. The one that will take care of all of your medical directives, that will take care of your power of attorneys, that will take care of your wills, your revocable trust, starts at $27.95 all in, and then $95 a year after that to handle the unlimited changes you need. Now, one of the other features it has is maybe your plan is to take advantage of what's known as a Medicaid qualifying trust. You're wanting to get assets out of your name so you can use Medicaid as your long-term care plan. Well, we talked about in Medicare, we don't recommend that. There are tools out there that we can point you to that could get you there. For our business owners, one of a concern is making sure that their assets are fully protected from different creditors and predators that are out there. In the state of Nevada, it is illegal for you to even sue somebody and to try and break into their trust without proof that you are an official creditor. So they can't access they can't try and take money from your household unless a court's already approved it. So if you're trying to protect your family, there's a lot of different tools. There's a two-factor authentication for those that have different cryptocurrencies to protect your assets there. The moral of the story is this platform is robust, will take care of a lot of your different needs for typically half the cost of what it half the cost of what it takes to install an initial overall plan. I'm not saying it's right for you. I'm saying if you're interested, if you're concerned about some of the things we discussed today, let's just have an informed conversation about it. Matt, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's the thing, folks. The informed conversation. You know, we're gonna leave you with this, right? I mentioned this a few times. It's the holiday season. You're gonna spend time with the people you love, right? Maybe not the people you like, but the people you love, right? Because we've all got those people in our families, right? But at any rate, now is the time to have some of these conversations. And I'll say this, going into the end of the year, and especially with what we do for a living as professionals, what we're doing is so different from everybody else that the only question you really should be asking yourself is, when do I want to start working with Mission Financial Planners? And just as an example, going down the list, everything you've seen in the last month with us, first of all, you got a great dinner, right, to get started. But Social Security, those of you who've kept your Social Security appointment, we've already done an analysis for you to show you here are the biggest paying options for you and your spouse. But we also caveat that conversation with, we've got to make sure it makes sense given your other income sources, your spending goals, your tax goals, your estate goals, and your healthcare plan. Right? Then we got into, here's how Medicare works. Here's how IRMA works in terms of watching your income, managing your income to keep that Medicare expense as low as possible. Here's what Medicare does not cover. And, you know, if you think about it, it's the basics, right? It doesn't cover hearing, doesn't cover vision, doesn't cover dental, and it also doesn't cover long-term care. So what is long-term care? How does long-term care really work? And if what you'll remember from that workshop is, and we said it several times, but I'll say it one more time, is you need a long-term care plan. That doesn't mean you need to buy a policy, an insurance policy of some kind. It means you need a good plan. You should be working with Mission Financial Planners to develop that long-term care plan. In addition to that, and I know we said it just a few times, but there's also Savers Health. Savers Health is our Medicare and health insurance provider, working all 50 states, right? And they are an independent health insurance agency that is able to make sure you're getting the coverage you need, right? And the coverage you want. Last week we got into taxes, and I think Ken did a terrific job of breaking down tax issues for people, right? Yeah, we gave you some high level stuff to talk about. And I know we said we were just scratching the surface, but when you look at the impact of managing that tax bill, right? I've got the most tax-free income possible coming into the home. Where does that come from? Social Security is a tax-advantaged income source. Roth IRAs can create tax-free income. Life insurance policies can create tax-free income. Am I maxing that tax-free bucket with those three items? Did I fund an HSA when I was working, in addition to my Roth IRA, to make sure I was going to be able to use that HSA in retirement as well, right? And those are just the basics, folks. But you can, you know, when you saw some of those examples, how saving $1 million in taxes over a 30-year period has a huge ripple effect on your financial well-being, but also on the legacy you're going to leave. And that's where I'll wrap up the whole series. I know we're right at time. But that's where I'll wrap up the whole series, folks. The legacy you're going to leave, and I know we talked about estate planning tonight, the legacy you're going to leave is not just the money. It's how you're remembered. And if you do all these other things, and I know it's a lot of work, but we're here to help you do the work, right? We don't leave you on an island. We're here to help. If you do the work with us, part of your legacy is going to be that, you know what? Mom and Dad were never worried about money. When Dad got sick, Mom wasn't worried about how to handle the healthcare issues. She never had to call me to come over and help change Dad's diaper, right? When Mom finally passed away, oh my gosh, it was so easy. We were able to throw this enormous party in Mom's memory because Mom had a great plan and made it easy for us to do that. That's part of your legacy, folks. And you know, and Ken says this all the time, but getting back to the basics, what makes that legacy possible is the retirement income plan. And keeping an eye on taxes, keeping an eye on healthcare, keeping an eye on estate. That's it. We are the team that does that better than anybody else. and you really want to work with us. So we're going to follow up with you. I know it's Thanksgiving week. A lot of you have people coming into the home, coming into town and things like that. We are not going to call you tonight. We are definitely going to let you on your way. We are going to check in with you next week though. And especially those of you, maybe we haven't done the one-on-one yet, just to confirm the meeting time, wish you a happy holiday, and let's get this process started. But otherwise, folks, thanks again. Have a great and safe and happy holiday season, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.